Welcome to Xecurity Pulse.
Every morning, before I walked into the concert section, I said a little prayer. Taha, that's a loaded question. The officer has to make the assumption that the person is not qualified.
Let's do a simulation,
Don't use a highlighter. Do not use dark background. If you really want an officer to read a certain area of, for example, a 100-page journal article, let that officer know. And then mark the paragraph, underline it, bold it.
She had been denied 6 times. And I decided I was going to issue her visa.
Don't do it.
If you're not qualified, no one can make you qualified. No.
Thank you so much for having us.
Pleasure.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Xecurity Pulse. And today we have a very special guest with us. If you are living in the US, and if you even not living in the US, but if you want to go through the immigration procedures, or want to pursue the EB-101 NIW journey, one questions or one thought process you have in your mind that how to file such cases and what happens behind the scenes. So we have today with us Düden and Marta to talk about all of this. So I'm very excited for this and looking forward to this episode for a while now. So here we are. Welcome, Marta. Welcome, Düden.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
So to start off, I'll want to talk about your journey. So I'll ask each one of you that how did each of you end up building up this career in immigration? And what is that one interesting thing you like about being in the immigration industry?
Hi, Taha. It's really wonderful to be here with you and your audience. My journey really started as an immigrant. I moved to the United States when I was 12 years old. And since then, I went through the entire process myself as an immigrant. So, I came on an e-visa, then I got a green card. And that was when I was in university. And then I became a citizen in 2008, literally 3 days before the deadline to register to vote in the presidential election of 2008. And then 4 years later, I became an American diplomat and I was serving overseas. So I have experienced the full journey. And in fact, I also petitioned my daughter to come to the US. So I've gone through the petition process myself. And when I joined the Foreign Service, I joined in the economic cone. So I was not a consular coned person. And I joined in the economic cone because I really enjoy working in trade relations and economic affairs, and that's my forte. But any Foreign Service officer, when you join the State Department, you have to do consular tours. So my second tour was my consular tour, and I was serving as a visa officer at the U.S. Embassy in Madrid. And what's special about Madrid is you get people from all walks of life, from every nationality that you can imagine, applying for any visa category that you can think about. So it was really, I had the whole wide range of visa applicants coming to my window. And obviously, before I did that tour, I had to take a course called Congen. So I'm not an immigration attorney. I didn't study immigration law, but I was an adjudicator, which meant I made those decisions at the window, whether to approve or deny visas. And before doing that, you get what's required training that the U.S. Congress has required from all Foreign Service officers going to do a visa tour. So I did my Congen training. And then next thing you know, I was off and I, was at the window making those decisions. And just to touch on your question, what's the one thing that was always top of mind for you? Every morning before I walked into the concert section, I said a little prayer. I'm somebody who, really wants to make the right decisions. And I knew every single person coming to my window was a human being. And they had a life of their own. And they had paid money to come to the visa window, and they had their own aspirations and dreams. And I also came to the window with the knowledge and understanding that I was the US's first line of defense. So for anybody wanting to come to the US, my top priority was always national security. I didn't want to issue visas to people who were coming to not follow the rules of the visa or to do any harm. I wanted to ensure that, to the best of my ability, I was approving visas for legitimate travelers who had legitimate reasons of being in the US. And I was protecting national security, but I was facilitating legitimate travel. So this was top of mind for me. Every single day that I walked into the embassy, I literally said a prayer, please help me make the best decisions today. Because I'm also human, right? And I also make mistakes. So I'll leave you with that.
Thank you, Dylan. I think that's so powerful. I will give it to Marta, and I would love to hear her journey as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me be here. It may sound like I am copying a lot of what Düden said, but surprisingly, we are very, very similar, both in our professional and our personal world. I also am an immigrant. I came here from Poland with my parents about 2 weeks after I turned 5. So, I live the immigrant lifestyle still to this day, helping my parents get through something as basic as their first, tax filing or getting insurance, or even to this day where they're, going through getting their retirement. That entire life has been something that I've lived through, and that's really what brought me to USCIS. That's always been my dream, is to take what I lived through and be able to help those that are going through the same things. So I joined USCIS right after graduating with my grad degree, and so 17 years later, I'm really dating myself. I was an officer. I adjudicated any and all types of adjudications that USCIS takes. Then I became the supervisor in the office, and then the field office director. So on top of the 17 years, I had 13 years of that in management. So I managed the entire office, all the files that went in and out. I represented the entire office in any cases that needed representation, spoke very directly with attorneys, congressional staffers. So all that fun stuff that went about it. And to answer your question, why and what made me stay there and why I
Yeah.
did what I did. Again, it's just like Düden, because I think our immigrant backgrounds, what we went through, but also the love and acceptance that we got from this country that we immigrated to be able to now work for the country, right? I think that's really what really made me motivated to do this, and I did leave last year USCIS, and now the mission is to still continue to bring both sides of immigration together and have a better understanding and a better communication of how not saying every case needs to be approved, but how to make sure that the law is being adjudicated well, evaluated well for both sides, and that we move things on whichever way they go.
Nice, nice. So powerful. I'll ask you one question, which actually I faced. So I'll tell you my story. So I was in Saudi Arabia. One thing that I wanted to achieve is to, explore better opportunities for myself, and that is where I started this, immigration process, where I applied for this H-1B lottery system. Yeah. And then I was called for an interview at Jeddah Embassy. So when we, went through the interview process, so me and my family were there, and when we went through the interview process, the officer who was standing in the window, he said, okay, you're good, and like he asked like few questions to us, and he asked for our passports, and we were so happy after that, right? That we got the visa, and my wife was like, okay, now we want to buy some stuff as well, right? So we were all became so excited. Then after like 4 days while we were waiting for our stamp on our passport, we were told like, your case has gone through their administrative processing. So wanted to touch briefly on that. I mean, is there a framework or a checklist that if an applicant is coming, his process has to go through administrative processing, sorry, we think about administrative processing, one thing we know, like, it's like nobody's know that when you'll get the green light, right? So, what's your take on this?
Taha, that's a loaded question. Well, so first of all, I think it's important that you understand what the visa officer is doing at the window,
Yeah,
right? So the visa officer at the window is, number one, confirming that you are who you said you are to USCIS. Because
yeah,
before you showed up for your H-1B visa appointment,
yeah,
you had to file an H-1B petition with
yeah.
USCIS, and it had to have gotten approved. So USCIS, and Marta's going to talk a lot about that today, does everything on paper, majority of the time, right? They do some interviews, but it's for people who are already in the U.S., but the majority of their adjudications are based on paper evidence, which is very different than what a visa officer does. A visa officer does not look at paper unless it's for an immigrant visa, does not look at paper that much, and they're having a verbal conversation with you. So they're confirming that you are this credentialed individual that USCIS adjudicated and approved the petition for.
Oh, yeah.
And they're ensuring that everything that you essentially told USCIS is pretty much true. As much as they can do that in a 2 to 3 minute, visa interview. So once they have done that, from their perspective, as long as you don't have a criminal background or, something else going on, they're going to tell you your visa is approved. Now, on the other hand, obviously we have system checks, right? So beyond what you do with the officer, the State Department has a lot of systems that run through a whole bunch of checks. So if, your case got stuck in one of those system checks, which happens sometimes, whether it's due to, a name, a fingerprint, could be somebody who has a very similar profile to you, who has a different background, etc. So there could be a whole host of reasons why your case needs additional review because of something that came back in a system check. And sometimes all of those system checks are done before you show up at the window, and it's all green. And, when they tell you your visa is issued, you do get your passport back with the visa inside your passport. But sometimes those systems checks aren't done before the visa interview. And from the perspective of the visa officer, they have done what they are supposed to do, and your visa is approved is what they tell you. But then additional checks need to be done. Now, of course, today, with a whole host of visa categories, there's also social media vetting. So, that also could lead to administrative processing. Other reasons why something could be an administrative processing is the visa officer is not fully convinced with certain details of your case. For example, if you've ever had an arrest, and you have your arrest documents with you, they may ask for those documents at the window, and they may tell you, I'm sorry, your case is now going to be in administrative processing. And that's for them to review. So every administrative processing is different. I cannot tell you what happened with your case because I am not in the system.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is you have no idea what could be going on in the background. It could be a whole host of things. And some administrative processing is fully handled by the staff at the consular section. Some administrative processing is handled in Washington. And so they can't give you any information about what's going on in the background. You're going to get the same automated message if you inquire about your case. When to really be worried or stressed out is, I would say, after 6 months, if your case has been stuck in administrative processing for 6 months. And I have met people whose cases have been stuck in admin processing for 2 years. You just never know what's going on in the background. But I mean, this is a way of telling you it depends, right? But I hope I was able to shed some light, at least, as to what
Yeah.
might have been going on in the background.
Nice, nice. Marta, you want to add something to this?
Yeah, I mean that's Duden's world, so I think, I think she covered it all. It's very similar with USCIS, when you hear your case is pending, that there's a lot of things going on in the background that, we may not always be able to share.
Got it.
So, that doesn't mean that it's not moving or not being looked at, but there's just something getting processed in the background that may
Nice,
take some
nice.
time.
Uh, One follow-up question, Düden, on this was like since you have been dealing with all such administrative processing cases, and and you also feel the pain of whoever is coming to your way. So is there any like expedition or expedite?
I always recommend, first of all, the congressional office isn't going to work with you unless you are a U.S. citizen or resident. Like there needs to be a U.S. nexus to the congressional request. That's why I said your employer, because, your employer is an American employer. They have an
Mhm.
interest in you coming to work, and they can only wait so long, right? So if they can make an argument to the office of the congressperson or senator as to why this case is really important for them and they really need this person in the US to do this job,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
that is sent to the embassy or consular section. And it's typically reviewed by the visa chief. So it does get, senior level eyes on the congressional request. Now, congressionals can't force, a positive outcome. So I don't
Yeah.
want people to get the wrong idea that, this is going to have, that kind of an impact on your case. But what it could do is if it's your case has been dormant for some time because, everybody's busy
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
thousands of cases, it might help move the needle a little bit. It might help, the whoever is handling the administrative processing to say, oh, I better look at this case at this point because we just got a congressional in. So that's
Got it.
one thing
Got
that
it.
could be done. I know in addition, people do also file mandamus lawsuits. I recommend talking to attorneys who have filed these. They will give you, the right kind of advice and guidance as to whether they think you have a shot. Typically sometimes when a mandamus is filed,
Mhm.
the case might get to a conclusion faster. But again, you don't know what kind of a conclusion the case is going to get, whether it's positive or
Yeah.
negative.
Yeah.
But it is something again that could help move the needle.
Nice. Nice. Well said. Well said. So we'll change the gears a little bit. So you both excel in your careers, and you've been doing great. So, like over the years, what did you personally strive for in this work? Like, what did doing the job well looks like to you? Any incident that you remember in which uh, you did the best, but still, I mean, there is something which is not in your hands.
Um, there's always going to be situations where, especially, with USCIS, if you're interviewing these people and you're face to face with them, and there's a situation that the law just absolutely stops them from receiving whichever benefit that they applied for. No, there's really we've looked at the rate waivers, the discretion, whatever else is available, and yet, that benefit cannot be approved, right? That's just part of taking the oath when you become an officer,
Hmm.
for the federal government. You take the oath to protect the security of the government and to follow the law. And so there's really nothing you can do, whether that person, is sitting in front of you and, you believe that they could be a good person or, a great employee or whatever the case is.
Hmm.
The law is the law and you have to follow it. So it's not fun. It's not exciting to deny people. It's not anything that an officer wakes up in the morning and looks forward to. Most officers are very similar to Duden and I. Most people that work in the immigration world are also immigrants or are very close
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
an immigrant, right, lifestyle. So, the goal is to just apply the law correctly, ensure every applicant has an opportunity to present their case, not to find reasons to deny, but evaluate the evidence and of course follow the law. And it's the law and we have to follow it, and there's really nothing else we can do. We can't tweak it in any way. But of course, just remembering every day, each file is a person. Every single case is a family or an employer or someone waiting to hear their next step of what their life will take them. So just remembering that mindset, and that's something I did a lot, running a field office, is when I, had meetings with the officers, I always made sure to remind them, I understand we see thousands of cases and files.
Yeah.
But we have to, remember that each and every one of those are a person or an employer, right? Waiting for that decision. So to keep that in mind.
Nice, nice.
Mm-hmm.
For the visa world, the way the law is written for a lot of visas is the officer has to make the assumption that the person is not qualified. And the interview is where the applicant is burdened with the task of convincing the visa officer that they are in fact qualified. This is the way the law is written. We didn't write the law, but this is the way the law is written. And so if you come to a visa interview and you don't say anything, your visa is likely going to get denied, especially if it's subject to 214B. Because that's the way the law is written. The law is written from the perspective of you start at a negative, and as you speak, you move towards the positive. So if you are not prepared and you come to the visa interview clueless as to what is expected of you, the chances of that visa getting approved get smaller and smaller and smaller. And so this was one of the things that I really hated seeing, because, even if I wanted to believe that people were qualified, if they could not make that argument at the window, I had no choice but to deny the visa. And that's why I'm in this business now. I started Italier Consulting, and, we have Visas 101. And I'm so thrilled to be working with somebody like Marta, who is just of the same exact mindset, as I am. We are all in this business today now on the other side, helping applicants, working with attorneys, because there is so much that the applicants miss that they don't realize when they're filing a petition, when they're going in for a visa interview. We are here to kind of fill in that gap, that educational gap. Marta and I, and Dean, my other colleague that we work with, none of us are attorneys. We are not immigration attorneys, but we work with attorneys, and we help fill that gap of the perspective from the other side of the window or from the other side of the desk, to explain to people how officers actually think and assess cases.
Yeah.
So that's why we do this today.
Fantastic. So I want to go inside the USCIS mind here. So there are thousands of cases that you guys deal with, right? Looking at the 1,000 petition that you guys have, is there a common red flag that you can point out that you see in those cases? And secondly, how do you differentiate between somebody who is just fluffing and who is just building and manufacturing the evidences genuine?
Yeah, great question. I would start with the red flag, right? There's several out there that officers are trained to look for. The more cases you look at, the quicker they show up, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest red flags, in my situation, I would say lack of consistency. Just something like the dates are off, like the resume compared to the recommendation letter. If you're getting a recommendation letter from the supervisor that's on your resume, but yet the
Hmm.
dates are not correct, the duties are not correct. You're calling yourself a manager on the resume, but on the recommendation letter, the supervisor said you were just training to be a manager. So you didn't actually manage people, right? Little things like that become big things. That's really what officers are looking at is really the consistency of, were you really who you're saying you are? Are you providing the evidence to prove that, right? And I always say it's not sending the entire kitchen sink. It's not sending evidence on top of evidence. It's really providing what exactly proves the achievements that matter under the law, that prove the criteria that you're trying to meet. Um, and and making sure the officer understands what you send in. It's great to have a published article or a published journal,
Hmm.
but if the officer doesn't know exactly what that means and how that really satisfies whatever the criteria you're trying to satisfy, then it's really not going to go very far. An officer doesn't have, frankly, the time to read through, hundreds of pages of journal articles, nor do they feel the need to. They may not even understand half of what it says because that's not their background. Most officers are not scientists or, AI or whatever other, you know, backgrounds they may be. So really, it's just providing the correct evidence, but also telling the officer why that evidence was provided and what part of the law this evidence meets.
Nice, nice. So it
Mhm.
all comes down to the articulation and the way that how you have put up your case, right? So, uh,
Absolutely.
especially the candidates that I have talked to, like they uh, have questions around that. If a case has already been approved, let's say we have an I-140 which is approved, and there are some cases which get stuck in the 485 scenario. So, uh, is there a uh, is there a checklist that they need to follow if they don't want to stuck somewhere like after the case is approved?
Essentially, your question is, if the case was approved by USCIS and then the person is heading to a visa interview,
Yeah,
how should they be thinking about this?
yeah, yeah. And is there a way that the case can still get stuck
Of
in the
course,
later half of the petition?
of course. Absolutely. And I think this is a great question, Taha, because a lot of people make this false assumption that if USCIS approved your case, the visa is in the bag.
Yeah,
It's going to get approved. It's a bureaucratic step. I just have to show up at the embassy. The answer is no. Please do not go in with that attitude.
yeah,
Do not go in with that mentality. Um, because, especially with some visa categories that are subject still to 214B. And I'll give you an example, the O1, okay?
mhm,
A lot of people, the word got out that O1s are fabulous visas, and yes, they are. It's the extraordinary ability visa. The word got out that that's a fantastic visa for people who want to come and work in the US, and it is. But it is, as the law states, reserved for people with extraordinary ability. So that visa is also, it can be denied under 214B, not for immigrant intent, okay? But it can be denied under 214B. And when applicants come to the visa window with the attitude of, oh, I'm just here for my visa stamp, it makes it sound like you went to the grocery store to buy some candy.
yeah,
Like it's in the bag already. I'm here to pick it up. It doesn't make it seem like the visa interview is another step in the process that you have to actually, go through and qualify once more. So my biggest recommendation is do not call it a visa stamp. Visa stamp is really old terminology. Back in the day, we used to stamp people's passports. We don't do that anymore. Now it's a visa foil. It's the sticker that you place inside a passport. But the purpose of your interview is to, again, ensure that you are once again qualified for this visa category. So you have to go in prepared. It is another step in the process. It's a legitimate step in the process. You have to go in prepared. Do not make the assumption, the false assumption, that your visa is going to get approved no matter what, because that is not the case. People come to me all the time after their visas have been denied at the window, and they come scrambling and worried, and they're like, "Oh my God, what do I do?" And when I hear of how they did at the visa interview, I realized, my goodness, you went in completely unprepared, and then the officer denied you. So
nice. So Marta, I'll let's make it this fun. So I'll let's do a simulation. So I'll give you a file here. For example, you are a USCIS officer, and you're reviewing the petition. So if you see a file, in your routine work, like what are the common sort of things which you see in your in a petition? Like, can you walk us through, like, how do you review the file, and what are the steps that you take in order to make sure that this person has real.
It depends on what the person is filing, right?
Let's talk about the EB1A visa category.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you're looking does the person, like you said, have the impact, and does the person meet the criteria? And is the evidence there to show that? And is the evidence there to, so I can clearly connect it to the legal standard of what is needed for that filing? And that's where I think people see a lot of RFEs. RFEs, which is request for evidence, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad news. It just really tells you that the officer still has questions. It may be that the evidence is actually missing, or the evidence is there, but the officer is not really understanding how it connects to what the legal standard is, of how it connects to the criteria that you're trying to prove. Or honestly, it's there and the officer just cannot seem to find it because it's buried, right? And I've seen that. I've seen where there's hundreds of pages of a journal article, and all of a sudden, right, under page 101, there's a job offer, right? Email, something that just is randomly hidden, something that can be easily missed, because I'm not going through page by page by page of a journal article. I'm looking to where it really makes sense for the legal standard and the criteria. So again, just having the best file is when I open it and there's a table of contents. It's telling me exactly what page to look at. There's a great summary that's usually written by the attorney, a brief summary, however you want to call it, but really just summarizing who this person is, introducing them to me, what their background is, what their endeavor is, and here is why this person meets this and this prong, or this and this criteria, right? And where I can find this evidence, just really just it's a map, it's just leading me down. And the file is the way it's filed is the way the table of content is going. Everything is labeled, everything has a page number, and everything is easy to read. And that's one thing I think a lot of people don't understand, is that all these files get scanned into a system that USCIS uses, that then an officer looks at. And we all know the way things get scanned sometimes, if it's a very dark background, you're not going to be able to see it very well. If there's a highlighter that was used, that highlighter might then delete the words instead of actually be looked at as a highlighter. So I always say, don't use a highlighter, do not use dark background. If you really want an officer to read a certain area of, for example, a 100-page journal article, let that officer know. Hey, on this journal article, page 5, and then mark the paragraph, underline it, bold it, that will show up. Please read this, where this proves, so and so meets this criteria, right?
Got it.
Make it as simple as possible for the officer to find exactly what they're looking for, and not question that. It is not the officer's job to be the detective. It is their job to adjudicate the case, right?
Oh, got it. This is so interesting. So you mentioned interesting point regarding like screening and scanning the petition, right? That it has to be properly structured and formatted. So let's say, there are people coming in from different industries. Some of them are having a good technical background, some of them are doctors, some of them are sports athletes, right? So is there any like technical assistance that the officer uses in order to understand what's there inside the petition, or it's just like, hey, this clause should match this law, and if it's there, it's right, like green light, you have to clear it.
Good question. The officer's job is to be the officer and understand the law and
Hmm.
what is required in whichever case filing that is. The officer's job is not to sit there and try to understand the technical or medical language, right? That is on the filer, that is on the attorney or the client that files this case to explain that to the officer. And I always say, the government has a lot of acronyms. We are probably the most guilty in sitting and talking in acronyms, probably an entire, hour we can just say in acronyms and we would understand,
Yeah,
but you
yeah.
wouldn't, right? So think of it that way, where, the medical field, the IT field, everyone has their own acronyms, their own language, and, you can't expect others to understand. So, putting an officer in a situation where you're giving them something to where they would have to, even Google what that means or what does this acronym stand for, you're
Hmm.
immediately putting possibly an RFE quickly into the file because the officer just doesn't have time or the knowledge to really understand what you're saying,
Hmm.
um, and needs that explained by you, right? Of course, you have to put in the evidence. The
Yeah.
evidence is there, but can you then put a cover letter and explain in a summary what this evidence means, right? What it stands for, what these acronym means. And basically the biggest thing is explain why this, makes the client stand out, why this makes the client extraordinary, why this client, is the top of their field, right? Not
Got
just
it.
providing the article, but explaining it and not expecting the officer to try to figure it out.
So there's a like category, the criteria like media and awards, right? In the EB1A petition, right? So there's a lot of companies now who are giving like fake awards, or you can just pay to get featured, right? Uh, but there are also some genuine cases who get these awards. So is there a flag or something like a checklist which they have to follow, or if you have to decide that, hey, this is exaggerated or this is really paid one, like, what do you have to say on this?
Well, I mean, first of all, I just want to, you know, congratulate Marta for doing such a beautiful job explaining the importance of file organization. Um, I'm going to echo that. The purpose of the file and the purpose of the applicant when they come to the visa window, their whole entire goal needs to be, how do I make it so easy for the officer to go through the checklist that's in the law, the qualifications that are required, that are being assessed, for them to go and really make a decision as to yes or no, this person is qualified. If you make it into a maze, a labyrinth, of documents, if you make it so hard for the officer to pick the information that is needed to make this assessment, you've already created an uphill battle for yourself. Same thing at the visa window. If you wait for the officer to ask the questions, oh, but
Yeah.
they didn't ask me that. You're already creating an uphill battle for yourself. Go in understanding, okay, what is this interview for? What is this filing for? What am I trying to demonstrate to the officer, whether it's a USCIS officer or a visa officer? And how can I make it so easy for them to understand that I am qualified for this visa or for this petition? And if you go in without this mentality and you leave it all in your attorney's hands or, the officer's hands, you are not setting yourself up for success.
Yeah.
And I think Marta did a great job of explaining, it may seem very benign. So what if my documents aren't organized? Well, the officer isn't going to spend 3 weeks reading each page in your document. No, they're going to spend 30 minutes to an hour looking at your documents. And for the visa officer, they're going to spend, a couple of minutes before your interview and then a couple of minutes during your interview. So it's totally up to you to sit in the driver's seat and drive that assessment. If you don't, you're stuck with the outcome, and it may not be a very pretty outcome. So,
Nice. Wonderfully explained. So I want to, like switch some gears, and I want to get to the cases where if it goes sideways. So there's a common myth in the industry or within the attorneys industry, like I would say, that when you are filing, when you are doing like premium processing, there is a 99% chance that you will get an RFE. So first of all, I want to ask you both, is that a true thing or something which is just made up?
The last I saw that, yes, there is a higher percentage rate on RFEs. Sometimes more with premium processing, but that's just USCIS numbers. So, it's not, I don't think it's 99%. That's not a number I've ever seen. But I would say, it's definitely about, I think 47% last I saw. It again, and a lot of it I think is because, a lot of the filings are just throwing in so much into the case that is not needed and unnecessary. And even if it is necessary, it's not being explained in the right way. And like Düden said, an officer has, 30 minutes to an hour with thousands other cases waiting to review that. And so if that evidence is not there clearly, then the RFE will be coming out. And with premium processing, the officer is seeing that case sooner. So it may look like the premium processing is getting, RFEs quicker. It's because they're being looked at sooner, as they should be with premium processing. So really that's the only thing I see. But and I think that's really where my main goal is doing what I'm doing now, is to bridge that gap and that understanding of really what are officers looking for, and how can attorneys and clients file these cases in that way, in a better understanding way, to have that communication between each other, and understand that an RFE is here because the officer needs some clarification, not always because it's a bad thing, but the clarification is needed for the officer to make the right decision.
In your view, how should someone mentally and strategically approach responding to an RFE? Is there a template that you can recommend while responding to RFEs?
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely no template when every single case, every single person is different, right? Like I said, it's not always bad news. It doesn't always mean that you have to gather so much more evidence. You have to read through the RFE carefully. Read exactly, word by word, what the officer is looking for, and what is something that maybe you already think you provided, and it possibly could be in the case, but obviously the officer did not understand that it met the criteria that you were trying to meet, or the prong, right? It's just not connected to the legal standards. So in the RFE, you want to respond thoughtfully. As an attorney, I would definitely respond again with a good summary, explaining the new evidence that you're providing, if that is needed. Again, how it meets the legal standards, and also explain if there is evidence that you believe that you provided that the officer already has, but maybe did not understand. Again, just providing those clear-cut explanations is very important. It doesn't always mean submit more and more documents and overload the case. It's simply just having that communication of, okay, this was already submitted. Let me explain. Obviously, I did not explain enough what it means to, prove whatever point we're trying to prove. So
Got it.
just having, again, that understanding that the officer will not and does not understand a lot of the evidence submitted in that language, nor do they have
Got it.
time to go through everything and try to find the client's name on page 99.
Yes.
It's truly just leading the officer to the evidence, and do not submit any evidence unless you can prove that this evidence meets whatever standard you're trying to meet. Don't just
Got
submit
it.
evidence just to submit evidence, just because there's extra. Well, maybe if I provide more, well, then you're providing more and you're causing more confusion, and you're opening a door.
Very well explained. I wanna switch to you, Durin. One question or one thought that I like usually hear from the attorneys is that, so if someone got a denial after an RFE or a NOID, or something bad happens, then you don't have to refile, after like 1-2 months. Uh, and the reason what they give is that, since your case is fresh and, you just have a denial, you have to wait for collecting more evidence and making your case more stronger. Whereas the applicants say that, hey, I have all fresh evidences with me. If I wait any time longer, I have to collect more evidence. So the letter of recommendation that I have got, I have to, re-ask for those letters again. So is there a is that what you have also experienced? That is that true even, like, or can I just refile whenever I want?
So I think this is a question better suited for Marta, as she dealt with the USCIS petitions. I can answer from the visa perspective. If your
Okay.
visa got denied today and you want to reapply, the officer will tell you can reapply tomorrow. No problem.
Yeah.
I do get that question from the visa perspective a lot. When should I refile if I decide to
Yeah.
file
Yeah.
another visa application? That really depends. So if this was your very first visa interview and you went in completely unprepared and, shocker, your visa got denied,
Yeah.
I'd recommend preparing and then going in for your second interview. You can go in fairly quickly at that point, because if you think you had all the right qualifications, the only issue was you just didn't prepare for your visa interview, you can reapply fairly quickly. But if you went in and you were prepared and, the visa officer told you you didn't qualify for the visa and they denied your visa, then I would suggest waiting until your circumstances change, waiting until
Yeah.
something shifts where your hand is going to be stronger as you go in for your visa interview. If you have an approved petition and your visa got denied, I'd recommend going in for the second time for sure, because you have an approved petition at hand. The visa denial does not cancel out the petition approval.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Makes
there
sense.
are
Makes
two
sense.
separate things. So if your petition got approved, let's say you have an O1 that was approved. You went in for your visa interview, O1 got denied. You can prepare really well and go in for another O1 interview. I mean, I worked with certain people who were denied O1s twice at the window, and I prepped them, and then they went in for their third time and they got approved. So I've seen it happen. Obviously there's no guarantee that anybody's visa is going to get approved, but I always recommend prepare before your very first one so you don't have to deal with this again. Don't go in thinking this is in the bag. Don't go in thinking, oh, my petition is approved, my visa is going to get approved very quickly. You need to go in prepared.
I mean, with USCIS, it may be a little different. I would first say, make sure you read the denial carefully. Speak to an attorney, speak to someone that can really understand what the denial is saying and what the situation is. When the case was filed, did you ask the officer to figure out your case, or did you help them understand it? Right? That's my main point. Maybe the case that was filed did have the evidence, or at least you think it did have the evidence that it needed to prove what you were trying to do. but you were making the officer try to figure it out instead of providing that roadmap, that understanding, that summary, that table of content. Everything that I've mentioned this entire time we were
Yeah,
talking.
yeah,
If you think that that is the problem, then of course you can refile with a better way of preparing your
presentation. Yeah.
case and explaining what your evidence is. However, if your denial is, showing that there was evidence that is missing, and
Mhm.
you realize that this is something that is something that I didn't turn in, and maybe I don't have, maybe I'm not ready for it,
Yeah,
then it's time to start working again on your case. Do I need
got it.
to work on some more articles? Do I need to be, better peer reviewed? Do I need to do some judging? Do I need to have better recommendation letters? And again, this could take another year or two, because again, if you are denied, but then you within 3 months refile and you have all this brand new evidence in 3 months, that's going to be a red flag.
Yeah, yeah,
In three
yeah.
months, who did you pay to write your profile? Who did you pay to
Yeah,
write your article?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's just the honest answer. So
True, true, true.
we all know it takes a long time, right?
Very true.
Sometimes to
Uh,
make yourself or make your articles stronger, or put that type of effort into it, not 3 months later. But you can refile 3 months later if it is just because the officer was made to figure things out, to
got it.
be
Makes
the
sense.
detective,
Makes
right?
sense. One follow-up I have on this. So there is a interesting story I heard. So there was a candidate who got denied. And there is a season happening these days where most petitions are getting denied, right? If you wait for like little longer, then you have better chance of getting the approval. There is no like a like a period where the UCI is just rejecting the petitions, and they'll some time comes and they will start approving it, right? Is that the correct understanding?
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for whomever said that.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own opinions. I started working, in 2008 under one administration. I've been through three others, right? In my opinion, the immigration law has not changed. Yes, of course, there's always going to be change of policy, no matter what the administration likes to do. But USCIS continues to work and adjudicate cases and follow the law, and do their best, right, to have the legal standards be met by the applicants. So there's absolutely no time ever in my 17 years that there was a pause in any type of, you know, where we have to deny everyone or approve everyone, or in any way that what was said. So I cannot speak to who that was or why they said that. Opinion, in my 17 years, I have never seen that be.
When the officer will get that case, will they also reference the previous denial as well? That hey, this person was denied earlier, now he's refiling. Did he have that history as well?
The officer has the entire immigration history, including what happens with Düden at the desk overseas.
Oh,
Everything
oh,
is in
wow.
the file. Hmm.
So is there a case that sticks with you, one that taught you something you carried for the rest of your career? Any like interesting memory that you have which you would like to share?
I would say the biggest overall thing that sticks with me was my first naturalization ceremony as an officer, where I was able to naturalize a group of people. And, it's something that to this day will give me goosebumps. I derived from my parents when I was 12. I went to their ceremony,
Oh,
and I remembered, the excitement. And then to be that person, to be able to stand on the podium and raise my right hand with them and give them the oath, and listen to them, repeat after me, and at the end become U.S. citizen, and have that honor to finally shake their hands and welcome them officially to this country, is something that I will never forget, and something I frankly will miss.
nice, nice. So emotional. Thank you for sharing this, Marta. Any memory that has stuck with you, or any like myth about visa interviews that you wish you could put to rest?
Um, obviously visa officers are full of stories. I gotta say, after
Yeah.
having interviewed thousands upon thousands of people, I think one of the biggest things was honesty and consistency. I remember, I'll tell you one specific case. Okay. I interviewed this one lady. She had been denied like 6 times. She was applying for a V1, V2 visa. She had been denied 6 times. I
Okay.
mean, a couple weeks ago or months ago, someone on the line had denied her. And I listened to her story. I talked to her and I decided I was going to issue her visa. To me, it was a B1, B2 visa. So obviously we're looking at immigrant intent.
Mm-hmm.
After listening to her story, I decided to approve her visa because I truly believe she did not have immigrant intent. And I think it's important to realize that, some officers will overturn denials. It's not common. It is rather rare, because you also have to understand that these people who are interviewing you, they all work together. So I interview people all day, then it's lunchtime and I go to lunch with all my colleagues, and we hear each other from the window.
Yeah.
And if they see someone that they interviewed 3 months ago and they remember them, and now I'm interviewing them and I approve the visa, it creates some sort of a tension between the two officers, right? Because it's almost like me telling them, well, I think you made the wrong decision. But then, what I did that day is I spoke with my colleague who had denied this person's visa before. And I said, look, this is the story. After listening to the full extent of the story, I think they don't have immigrant intent. I think they're really going to go to the US, do what they say they're going to do, and they're going to come back. And obviously I'm taking a bet, because here's the thing. Every visa you approve, if that person stays, claims asylum, or does anything, they overstay their visa, they commit a crime, something happens, right? They're going to come back to the visa office, the unit, and they're going to come back to your visa chief, and then they're going to come back to you and say, Düden, you approved this visa, and now look at what they did. So you do find out if somebody overstayed their visa, if somebody, got pulled into secondary inspection, and it turns out they lied to you at the window and you didn't catch it. And the CBP officer caught it. Those stories do come back. I have heard of those stories. Thankfully, I didn't have too many of them. I had very, very few, but they also stayed in my mind. So when you end up approving a visa that 6 other officers had denied before you, you're taking a bet, right? And you have to stand by your decision. So I do want people to kind of keep that in mind as well.
Nice. Well said. So, if there is a case which is denied and they're refiling the case, and now that person gets approval, right? So, is there a situation where you guys internally hurdle and see that, hey, why was that denied earlier? So, is there any scrutiny that you guys, or have you seen done internally to maybe revise if there's any chance that was something overlooked?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the officer has every right and should, in my opinion, as someone who trained officers for several years, look at the previous case and look at the previous decision. And most of that previous decisions would be denials, and what was missing in that case, or what was the problem, and does this new refiling still have the same problem? Or have they reconciled it in any way? Have they added the evidence? Have they added, I don't know, the court documents, right? Something
Yeah,
as
yeah,
simple as
yeah.
this person is filing for a 485, legal residence application, and they still have a pending court case, and so the officer is not able to approve. But then when they refile, the court case is closed. They paid their fine. It's not a criminal CIMT of any malicious intent, right? It's just something that was something that just wasn't able to be approved in the first time. But this time they have everything closed out, paid off, fine is done, whatever the situation is. It could be something that simple. Whereas there's also a situation where you, as the client, would get denied due to misrepresentation or lying to the officer. In that case, that is really going to be looked at in a different way because lying or being found to defraud the government is a big negative factor. And so when you refile, if you have a chance to refile, that is something the officer will look at and consider in the next case, right? So definitely, like Düden say, be honest, be consistent, and just really tell the officer the truth, because at the end of the day, most of the time they know anyways, right? So there's really no point in hiding it, because it is a known fact. And if you are found to be lying, then you're going to have a really hard time getting approved in the future.
And
Got
it
it,
might
got it.
even lead to material misrepresentation, which,
Yes.
could bar you
Then you're
from
barred.
future immigration benefits. So,
Right.
Got it. Let's say, Marta, you are applying for your O1 or EB1 petition. Is there like what is the one thing that you would do different to what you have not done like earlier?
Yeah, like I've said throughout this entire podcast, it's really just filing the case correctly and making sure that I really do fall under this category and I'm filing under the correct category. And I think that's also a question that causes a lot of confusion. What is the difference between an O1, EB1, EB2, NIW? They are similar in a way, but there's also a big difference. Do I have the correct evidence? Am I filing the right thing? And am I submitting the evidence and explaining to the officer what this means?
Got it, got it.
I would say prepare. Go in with your eyes open, go in with an understanding. I want to say 10 years ago, services like ours didn't exist. Today, what we try to do, with Marta, with Dean, and my other colleagues in the industry, is we try to offer that officer's perspective. Until fairly recently, former officers didn't offer these kinds of services. And today we do. Today we are offering incredible expertise and knowledge for people to be able to, get a second look at whatever may have been prepared by their attorneys, or, do a proper interview prep, go through a mock interview to see what that experience is going to be like at the window. These services are available. And if it's going to be the difference between you being so educated and so well prepared that your case gets through, and it's going to open a gazillion doors for you and your future, take advantage of these kinds of services. Because they didn't exist 10 years ago. Today they do. So that's the biggest thing that I would say, because the more educated you're, imagine like taking the SATs, to get into college, right?
Yeah.
Going in with zero prep versus going in with a year's worth of prep, it makes a difference. Same thing with, a USCIS filing or a visa interview. In the end, you have so much to gain, potentially. Depending on the kind of visa that you apply for. But even for a B1, B2, I love to travel. And being able to travel to a place just to see it, just to broaden your horizons, even if you're coming to the US just for tourism, it's important, it's important. You don't just end up seeing the US in movies. You end up coming here, experiencing it for yourself.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
who
yeah,
knows
yeah,
what kinds of doors that's going to open, or, you know, things that it's going to
yeah.
lead to. So prepare.
Got it. What do you have to say for the manufactured slash fake slash build up profile building activities that are going on these days?
2-3 words. You're talking to two people that speak a lot more than that. I would say don't do it. That's my 3 words.
If you're not qualified, no one can make you qualified.
Okay, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you both with me. So, guys, when I started, pursuing this EB1 journey, I didn't have anyone to look up to. Coming from IT industry or sports athletes, they are getting denied. Well, so if you are anywhere in the world who wants to visit and who are seeking for the career opportunities, this is the place to be. Any final thoughts before I let you go?
No.
Thank you so much for having us.
Pleasure. Yeah. Thank you. We really enjoyed the conversation.